Hold on. Stop everything you're doing right now. Because one of the greatest defensive players to ever lace up a pair of cleats might be on his way out of Cleveland, and the Chicago Bears could be the team waiting with open arms. This isn't a rumor. This isn't a slow news day take. The breadcrumbs are everywhere, the clues are stacking up, and if you've been sleeping on this story, you just woke up at the right moment. If this kind of Bears content fires you up the way it fires us up, smash that like button, share this with every Bears fan you know, and hit subscribe so you never miss a moment of coverage like this. Now let's talk about what's actually happening here, because the details are wild. Respected NFL insider Albert Breer recently went on record saying he genuinely believes the Cleveland Browns should trade Myles Garrett. And not only that, he thinks it's a very real possibility. And right there in the group of teams he mentioned as logical fits. The Chicago Bears. Let that sink in for a second. Here's what Breer laid out. About 2 months ago, Garrett and the Browns organization quietly agreed to delay the payment of a massive $29.2 million option bonus, pushing it from late March all the way to a week before the regular season kicks off. Now, why would anyone agree to that? Here's what makes it suspicious. That move actually gives Cleveland more flexibility to attach the entirety of Garrett's 2026 compensation to any trade deal. Then, just last week, new Browns head coach Todd Monken told reporters he hadn't even sat down with Garrett yet. You pair those two things together, and then you add the fact that once June 1st arrives, Cleveland's cap damage on a trade drops dramatically, and suddenly this whole situation starts smelling less like routine contract management, and a whole lot more like a team quietly setting the table to move their most valuable piece. Breer didn't stop there. He named 4 teams he believes make sense as trade partners: the Bears, the Dallas Cowboys, the LA Rams, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Now think about each of those for a second. Dallas hasn't fully replaced what they lost at edge rusher. The Rams have a history of making bold all-in moves. They literally traded for Von Miller the year they won the Super Bowl. Philly could potentially create significant cap space and draft capital by moving a big-name receiver. But Chicago makes sense in a completely different, almost perfect way. And here's something that didn't get nearly enough attention at the time. Back at the trade deadline last year, the Bears reportedly called the Browns about Myles Garrett. Cleveland said no. The Bears then pivoted and made other moves along the defensive line. But that phone call happened. That interest was real. And on top of that, Chicago was also sniffing around Las Vegas Raiders edge rusher Max Crosby this past offseason. They weren't willing to meet the asking price of 2 first-round picks, but the point is, this front office has been actively trying to land a premier pass rusher. This isn't a new obsession. This is a pattern of behavior. So let's ask the real question here. Why on earth would Myles Garrett agree to push his bonus back 4 months? Think about it from a financial perspective. Every financial expert will tell you the same thing: take the money when it's available. $1 today is worth more than $1 several years from now. You always take the guaranteed money up front. Unless you're willing to be a little patient because you believe that delay gives you a real shot at getting out of a situation you've been unhappy with. Remember, Garrett requested a trade a year ago. So maybe, just maybe, he looked at this restructured timeline and thought, I'll wait a few months if it means there's a legitimate chance I end up somewhere I actually want to be. And the Browns' own front office has been dancing around the explanation. Their general manager came out and said Garrett is a Brown for life, that they didn't need to restructure anything if a trade wasn't being considered. But that explanation creates more questions than it answers. Because if there's truly no trade on the table, why delay the bonus at all? The only scenario where that move makes financial and logistical sense for Cleveland is if they're actively positioning themselves to trade him after June 1st, when his cap hit drops from over $40 million to around $15.5 million. That's not a coincidence. That's a plan. Question of the day, and we genuinely want to know what you think. Do you believe the Cleveland Browns are going to trade Myles Garrett this offseason? Drop your answer in the comments below. This is a big one. Now let's shift to the Bears' perspective, because this is where it gets really exciting. Should Chicago make a move for Garrett? Let's be completely honest about what this man is on a football field. 5-time first-team All-Pro. 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, and most people would argue he should have won that award at least 4 or 5 times total. He broke the single-season sack record last year. He did that for a terrible team. He did that while staying locked in, staying motivated, staying elite, week in and week out, for a franchise that gave him nothing around him. That is not something ordinary players do. That is the mark of a truly special competitor. He just turned 30 years old. And before you let that number alarm you, consider this. In 9 seasons in the NFL, Garrett has missed just 13 games total. Around 10 of those came in his first 3 years. Since then, he has been virtually indestructible. He takes care of his body, he's disciplined with his nutrition and recovery, and it shows. This is not a player entering decline. This is a player in his absolute prime with a realistic shot at reaching 200 career sacks, which would place him among the most dominant pass rushers in the history of professional football. Now, what does Myles Garrett do for the Bears specifically? Think about the current roster construction. The biggest weakness on this team has been pass rush. Everyone knows it, nobody argues it. But here's the beautiful part: you bring Garrett in, and Montez Sweat, who is already a legitimate threat, slides into a true number 2 role. Austin Booker, who has shown tremendous upside, slides into a number 3 role. Your defensive tackles suddenly see dramatically more one-on-one matchups because opposing offensive lines simply cannot double-team everyone anymore. And yes, the cap situation in year 1 is actually far more manageable than you'd expect given his star power. Could Cleveland ask for one of those edge rushers back as part of a package deal? Maybe. But even in that scenario, this writer would still do it without hesitation. Because you don't just get better when you add a player like Garrett. You transform. You become a different team. You become a team that legitimate Super Bowl contenders genuinely fear facing. And here's the real football question worth sitting with. If you truly believe the arrow is pointing up for this Bears roster, if you genuinely believe Caleb Williams is the franchise quarterback who takes this team to the next level, then isn't right now exactly the moment you try to make that kind of blockbuster move? You cannot force Cleveland to trade him. You can't manufacture the deal. But if the opportunity presents itself, and it increasingly looks like it might, is this the swing Ryan Poles should take? Now the price won't be cheap. We're talking possibly 2 first-round picks, a second or third rounder, and maybe a player thrown in. If it's 3 straight first-rounders, that's a conversation worth having. But if the package lands somewhere closer to 2 firsts, a day 2 pick, and a solid but not elite player, the Bears should be on the phone before anyone else. Keep your eyes locked on one specific thing in the coming weeks: whether Myles Garrett shows up to mandatory minicamp. If he's absent, this story explodes. This becomes the dominant NFL narrative heading into training camps. And the Bears, if they play this right, could be right at the center of it. Monsters of the Midway isn't just a nickname from the past. With Myles Garrett in a Bears uniform, it becomes a warning to the rest of the NFC. Subscribe and stay locked in, because this one is far from over.